If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Now hands up, who didn't see this one coming? The Biden re-election campaign has been on death watch for several weeks now. They've been doing everything that they could to try to avoid it because to them the alternative, Kamala Harris, was far scarier, but at long last, they just couldn't keep up the charade. So they've gone from Jomentum to just Jover, and now his re-election is Biden the Bullet. The puns write themselves. After years, and the last few months in specific, of lying and denying Biden's senility until it could no longer be denied, about the only thing lower than his mental faculties are his poll numbers. The white left, at least the donor class, was making it clear that they were bringing down a slow curtain on Biden. His catastrophic performance at the presidential debate was the very last straw. It just goes to show something that I've been saying for many years. Candidates don't win the presidency at the debates. But plenty of candidates have lost the presidency at the debates. If you look at the big moments that the white media talks about, whether it be the Nixon-Kennedy debate, or the Carter-Ford debate, or the Clinton-Bush debate, what do all of those candidate catastrophes have in common? That the guy who lost the debate also lost the presidency. Nixon sweating up a storm. Gerald Ford claiming that Eastern Europe wasn't dominated by Russia. And you had George W. Bush, who was denying how bad the economy was because it was his economy. Well, now we're having the same thing happening with Biden. Whispers of the need to replace him as the candidate have become a full-blown shouting match. When high-profile party donors like George Clooney tell you that it's time for you to bow out, that's how you know you need to leave. So the writing's been on the wall for a while now, even if Biden's eyesight was too weak to see it. But look at the way that this guy has announced that he's not going to be seeking the presidency this time around. He sent out a press release. You know, when Nixon resigned the presidency, he did it on camera. And true, Biden's not resigning the presidency, but his announcement was written as a press release. Mainly because Biden's so senile now he can't even read a teleprompter. Every day, more and more people from outside and increasingly inside D.C. were telling Biden he needs to drop out, until in the end, Biden's support had evaporated to the point where the only cheerleader he had left was D.L. Hughley. So in the end, Biden's support had literally become a joke. On a side note, it's kind of ironic that back in 2017, North Korea's dictator famously called Donald Trump a dotard. Dotard means an old person, especially one who has become physically weak or whose mental faculties have declined. Dotard is the word where we get daughtering from. North Korea should reserve that zinger for Biden. So where does the Democratic Party go from here? Well, from the looks of things, the same direction they've been going, straight down. The attempts to hype up Kamala Harris as the heir apparent aren't working. Phony enthusiasm from Democrat plants online, from shills and operatives, isn't going to translate into popular support. Nobody has been champing at the bit to see Kamala Harris replace Biden. Nobody's been dreaming about a Kamala Harris presidency. Nobody's been sitting there doing TV shows or movies or books or anything else about how great it would be for this woman to be president. She does not occupy anyone's daydreams. And clearly for a lot on the left, in political terms, she occupies their waking nightmares. The Democrats have tried to ignore Kamala Harris because over the last 4 years, every time she gets on camera, it becomes a mess. They've been hoping that Biden would be able to limp and stumble and bumble his way through at least one presidential campaign, and then they would figure out what to do about him in a second term. But they didn't get that far, and now they're stuck with the prospect of a candidate that they don't actually want. There's a lot of contrast that have been made online between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Notice how nobody was comparing Kamala to Biden? Because they already had, and as I detailed for you almost 2 weeks ago, even experts have determined that Biden was less likely to lose the White House than Kamala Harris, who never had it to begin with. There's a reason that she wasn't at the top of the ticket in 2020 or this year, because she already ran for the presidency, and she crashed and burned. But the comparisons that ought to be made, at least as far as black voters are concerned, isn't between Kamala and Trump, but between Kamala and Obama. What did Barack Obama do before he married Michelle? He had been having sexual relations with only white women. He married Michelle so he could have his black bona fides. She would give him his black legitimacy that he couldn't give himself. And even then, he didn't bother to actually marry Michelle until he started seriously thinking about pursuing a career in politics. And he knew that especially in places like Chicago, he wasn't going to go anywhere with a white wife. That would be too controversial. And a certain contingent of black women and even some black men gave Obama cred for having Michelle on his arm, so his ploy worked. The main thing a lot of black women loved about Obama was that they felt validated that he had a black wife, and not only that, he had a dark-skinned black wife, not a biracial or light-skinned wife. I guess if you can't have the presidency, then at least be married to one seemed to be the sentiment. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, had been in sexual relationships too. The rumors are that at least one of them was with a black man, low-down Willie Brown, and he greased the skids for her to get into politics, from the make-work patronage jobs he gave her, where all she had to do was show up, though just as often she didn't, but she would still get paid 6 figures annually, to the DA's office he helped her to run for, to Attorney General of California, and finally the Senate. It makes total sense that Kamala Harris is an invention of California, the home of Hollywood. Her entire political career was a stage-managed production, a political TV show, with Willie Brown being one of the producers. But when she stepped outside of the California political machine, her record followed her, and she got ripped apart by it. But what is Kamala Harris going to do to mend fences with the black vote? I haven't seen anything. Now, Kamala Harris is allegedly proud of being black. She said so. Well, actually, I can't find any instances where she's really gone on and on about being proud of being black. Sure, you have the occasional blink and you'll miss it mention of blackness, but she's far more proud of her Asian heritage. Even when talking about Jamaica, her main boast in that regard was something about marijuana. As vice president, she spent far more time touting her Asian heritage, so that tells you where she thinks she's going to get her campaign donations from. Now, she is married to a white man, but she keeps him under wraps. Now, black men are not so insecure as to need to see the biracial Kamala Harris with a black man on her arm in order to feel that she deserves our vote, but we do demand that she has to show what she has done for us, or what she's going to do for us. Kamala Harris's record on that is as empty as her list of accomplishments. What did Obama do for black voters when he was in the Illinois legislature, or as a U.S. senator, or as president? Absolutely nothing. He told us all he had to do was have an African father, and that was more than enough. However, he spent most of his time castigating black people in general and attacking black men in specific, and Kamala Harris is drawing from the same playbook. All she has to do is have a Jamaican father. She doesn't have to do anything for black Americans. Her Jamaican father is what she's already done. She didn't tell Asians that her Indian mother is all she had to do for them. She pushed for and got passed an Asian hate crime law. She told immigrants and white women in the LGBT vote what she would do for them. But what did she tell black people?
Do you support reparations for black people?
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No.
She made it very clear she wasn't going to do anything that benefits us, while specifically making sure she backed policies that have only benefited other groups. Black people get nothing from DACA. In fact, it hurts us economically. We get nothing from abortion. Black people are trying to have more babies, not kill the ones we've already got. Black people get nothing from the Asian hate crime law. Black people are the majority of hate crimes victims in America. But neither Biden nor Kamala Harris have said a word about that, to say nothing of pushing for any sort of legislation. Black people get absolutely nothing from transgender bathrooms. That's not something we've ever even said a word about. But the Democrats make it a point they produce for every other possible constituency under the sun, including so-called Biden Republicans. But they make sure to deliberately tell black people, we're not doing anything for you. Why? We can't do something specifically for you, while telling everybody else we can do things specifically for you. The double standard is the standard. All those things were legislation tailor-made to benefit only the constituencies that they mentioned, and nobody said, I'm not going to do something that only benefits Asian people, or I'm not going to do something that only benefits trans people. They bragged about those laws that they passed, that these other groups were finally being focused on. But with black people, they tell us to our faces what we're not going to get, what they're not going to do for us. And then they got the nerve to turn around and lecture us that we owe them our vote. They're trying so hard to make it seem like black people are happy at the prospect of Kamala Harris being president. Where's the ski-wee sororities who were Kamala's secret weapon at? Where's the boule bootlicks at now? They need the support of the black masses to get her in the White House, and that support isn't there. And there's a big reason why they need black people to be tricked into getting onto their hype train. Kamala's support from within the Democratic Party is soft. Not merely because of the Lichtman 13 Keys to the Presidency video I did a couple of weeks ago, but also because you got some of the heavy hitters within the Democratic Party who are wondering if maybe they can get somebody more electable onto the ticket. White media outlets have been reporting that Nancy Pelosi has been saying that maybe what the Democrats need to do is to actually have an open nomination process. That what they need to do at the convention is let's actually put it to a vote who ought to be on the ticket. Don't just automatically hand it to Kamala Harris. Now, ain't that something? Ain't it something that you got Mama Nancy who is saying that? Because Pelosi's saying she doesn't want a coronation for Kamala Harris. At least that's what the rumors are. Even though that's exactly what the Democrats would need to do if they're going to prop up this empty suit and try to make her into some sort of overnight best candidate. They have to find a way to not only do all sorts of quickie repairs on Kamala Harris's broken image, but they also have to be able to present this woman as not merely being legitimate, but inevitable. They don't have time for an intra-party brawl for the nomination. The Democrats need to bestow instant legitimacy on their nominee, and that means they need to have a coronation going on right now. Not nominate, but coronate. This is the heir apparent. There should be zero question from within the party about Harris being the nominee. And yet that's what we're seeing. And this coming from Nancy Pelosi, who is not only a fellow California politician, she also comes from Kamala Harris's stomping grounds in San Francisco. This should be the main person backing Kamala Harris. And yes, she's sitting here going, well, let's make sure that we're not doing a coronation here. We need to make sure that we go through all of our options. Let's not be hasty here. And this is supposed to be Kamala Harris's support inside the Democratic Party. Now, reports are also that Joe Biden has said that Kamala Harris has received his endorsement. But the problem happens to be there's a difference between endorsement and enforcement. Can he get the other Democrats to go along with it? At least give it the old college try. Yeah, the Democrats talk a whole lot about being terrified of a second Trump presidency, but the only thing these people are ever actually terrified of is losing their political offices. They're only terrified of losing their own power and privilege. If Trump gets reelected, it's not as if Nancy Pelosi is automatically going to be kicked out of the Congress. So for these guys, they can go ahead and play the game of, yeah, if Trump wins, how does this benefit me? And if Kamala wins, how does it benefit me? They can afford to play that game, because that's what the game actually is. And when you look at the other scuttlebutt online, you got people sitting here saying Michelle Obama. She polls better than Kamala Harris. Yeah, that's how you know the party's in trouble. So there is no guarantee that Kamala Harris is going to get the nomination just because she's the next in line for the succession of president. And that being the case, even if she does get the nomination, who will Kamala Harris pick as her running mate? Well, she is running the Obama playbook, even though half the time it hasn't worked for her. So I predict she'll do what she did with her marriage and choose a white guy to stand beside her, just like Obama did. And who will that be? Wouldn't surprise me if it was Gavin Newsom, but Kamala's chances of beating Trump are low. And does Gavin Newsom really want his own presidential aspirations to be dampened by being part of a failed presidential run? Probably not, though the Democrats' field of candidates is so shallow these days that long-term it probably wouldn't even matter. But what does matter is cash. And it seems these days the orange man is green. Trump's campaign fundraising hasn't been hurt by his criminal convictions. The attempts to wear him down through relentless lawsuits hasn't worked. The American people, at least those who are inclined to vote for the Trumps of this world, they've seen how he's held up under these trials by fire, and they've seen that he's weathered them all with his usual aplomb. If he's been affected by it, he sure hasn't shown it. And that's what's helped him maintain his support. Everyone has seen that this guy's had the world dump on him. And this man hasn't been moved. He hasn't seemed worn down at all, not defeated at all, or even slightly fatigued by it. Compare that, on the other hand, to Biden, who has no lawsuits against him, no criminal charges pending, and at this point he's completely worn out, chewed up, and ready to be put on curbside for pickup. Trump has overtaken Biden in fundraising, according to the Financial Times. Even white media outlets who are not necessarily on the right have had to admit Trump has closed the campaign finance gap. So not only has Trump not lost voter support, he hasn't lost donor support either. Burying him under a mountain of lawsuits hasn't caused his voter base or his donors to abandon him. Now, when you're losing an election to the guy who's got dozens of criminal convictions, that's when you realize you stink. And this is with a career political prostitute like Joe Biden. We don't actually know what Kamala Harris's campaign fundraising would look like, but we do know the last time she tried her hand at it, she failed. And what have we seen to convince us that things are going to be any different this time around, even with Biden's support? Speaking of support for Biden, how is Biden going to be remembered for this epic failure? Sure, you have some on the white left who are calling out how we shouldn't be missing Biden because of the Palestinians. Well, let me tell these leftists something. You didn't have to wait until the slaughter in Gaza to call Biden out on his psychopathic disregard for human life. From before he was in the Senate, Biden was attacking the rights and dignity of black people nonstop. He made statements, supported laws, and even wrote a few meant specifically to target black people. And he's done this his entire adult life. Black people are the canaries in the coal mine. If you're angry about Biden's handling of the war on Gaza, then I'd like to know if you white liberals were equally outraged about his war on black America. You weren't, and you're not. Because while you are able to recognize the humanity of Palestinians on the other side of the globe, you'll be damned if you're going to recognize the humanity of black people who are right in front of you. And that's the entire problem with the white left. Well, over here, Black Lives Matter is not some George Soros-funded slogan. We've been all about black lives before it became trendy. I haven't spent a lot of time giving a countdown to Biden's bowing out of the race because it didn't matter. Biden doesn't signify a candidate as much as he does a political ideology. So long as there's a binary choice between this slate of candidates, no matter who's at the top of the ticket, be it Biden, Harris, Newsom, or whomever, the policy will remain the same. And the policy is the problem. The rhetoric may be slightly, very slightly different depending on who's saying it. But the policy regarding black people, that remains exactly the same. There's the typical shop-worn talk about how, quote-unquote, the stakes have never been higher, etc. Actually, the stakes can't be that high because Democrats aren't acting like it. Trump has galvanized his base by promising them things, even if it's only revenge. Biden and the Democrats, on the other hand, have tried to bluff their way past black voters by promising exactly nothing, just giving the same scare talk about a second Trump presidency. Well, if democracy does indeed hang by a thread, then it should be easy for Democrats to do something that they've refused to do for decades. Give black people the tangibles we're owed. If the situation is as perilous as they say, then the simplest thing in the world should be for them to come to us and make the deal. But they won't, because black empowerment is the biggest threat to America as Democrats see it. They're far more scared of producing for black voters than they are with Trump ushering in a Fourth Reich. So no, black voters are not going to hear any more scare talk. We know when someone's genuinely afraid of something happening, as opposed to someone who's trying to manipulate and coerce us into doing something by pretending to be worried about something. We said it 4 years ago. The whole thing about Orange Man bad, that's a trick you only get to use one time. If you manage to get the presidency, you better produce for black voters, but they haven't. All they produce are excuses and lies. Democrats put themselves behind the 8 ball. They'll have to get themselves out from under it. But they will have a huge credibility gap. Biden made a ton of false promises 4 years ago, from his White House-level Police Accountability Commission, to his Lift Every Voice plan, whatever that was, to his George Floyd Policing Act, to his John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He promised a lot of largely empty, do-nothing policies, none of which were specifically for us. And in the end, he didn't even deliver on those nothing burgers. So to you Democrat shills, plants, bootlicks, and operatives who lurk in my comment section, don't kid yourselves. You're not going to be able to come up to us this time around with another list of do-nothing policies and tell us, oh, this time we actually mean it, and think that we're going to be convinced. You destroyed your credibility, but then again, you didn't have much to begin with. Oh, and remind me again, who was Biden's running mate when he was making all of those false promises to us 4 years ago? I'm sure if we talk to that person and ask them what they're going to do for us, they'll be different. Right? Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Roxanne Allen, Troy Joyner, Faith Speaks Life, Aaron Ray, and Jimmy Whitfield. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.